Inflation hits 9.1% year over year, the highest in recorded, well, not recorded history because they changed the numbers or way they measured the numbers, but the highest in at least 40 years. So we'll talk just a bit about that. And in the midst of inflation going up to that direction, the U.S. is to send $1.7 billion in aid to pay Ukraine's health workers. In other news, a Uvalde police officer is seen sanitizing his hands while the police are being held back and not going into the room to engage with the shooter. So we'll talk just a bit about what's going on with that. The January 6th Select Committee met again yesterday, so we'll talk about 8 takeaways from the hearing on day 7, plus 7 of the biggest lies that they've given out so far. And Posobiec pushes back a little bit on the narrative. I've not been able to independently verify what he's saying there, but if it's true, then the whole thing is gone. But we'll talk just a bit about what's going on with that. And BMW is now selling a subscription service for heated seats. The equipment is there, but there's a software block. Is this a bad thing for the US? Possibly not. We'll talk about that. It is going to be all of this and more. You guys are just as unique as breakfast tacos. I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Good morning, Edheads. Welcome to Contemporary. My name is Jay Edgar, and we have got a fair amount of stuff to go over here today, so we're going to get right into it. I was looking into this Posobiec thing before we got started, trying to figure out where it was and what the source was, maybe if there was video of the January 6th committee saying what it was that he had to say, because I didn't. Nobody's watching this thing. They go back and they look at the whole thing like, oh, it's bombshell! Oh, CNN's going to tell me what to think about this, which, I mean, to be fair, we're going to be using CNN, but they're not going to push back on any independent verification. They're not going to go look at anything else off of this, but I've been trying to figure out what it is and where they said that this happened here. I don't not believe it. That's the thing. It's completely believable that there was something else that was actually going on, and they don't want to tell you about this because they're trying to spin up a narrative because, well, let's face it, they're terrified of him running, or even the kingmaker at this point. There's a reason they're trying to astroturf Ron DeSantis into this right now, or a lot of these controlled opposition types, Beanie Boy, are trying to tell you that Ron DeSantis is going to be the answer. Mr. Executive Order himself is going to be the answer. Because I do believe they're terrified of Trump running again. So we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the Uvalde shooter. We'll be talking about the inflation report, which apparently has just dropped, right as I was hitting the button to go. So I'm actually going to try and get something up off of this. Because I know that I have a bunch of articles talking about where they were bracing for it. But if the number is out, the number is down. We will refresh that in just a bit after we get done with finance there. But yeah, from disclose.tv right before we went live. Just in, U.S. inflation surges to 9.1%, the highest in 40 years. Well, it's been the highest in 40 years for quite a while, but yeah, there's that. All right. Let's get into it. Let's get started. But before we do, make sure you guys go check out the Daily Ignoramus, the Breakdown with Birkenhoff, the Aria Conservative, and the Porch Boys. Go check out all of those great programs, all those great Friends to Liberty, Friends to Freedom, and in some cases, Friends to Monarchy. Go check out Go check them all out. They're just some of my favorite people in the world. I'm not going to lie about that at all. So go and check all of them out. Most of them stream daily, or at least a couple times a week. Go start checking out the call-in shows for the Porch Boys as well. It's going to be a great time. It's going to be a fun time, and you will get to see some different sides and some different ways that the news is analyzed, or the memes are analyzed, or the way the culture is analyzed as well. Also, make sure you guys go check out KTZed and Tweets by Brit over on Twitter and watch them for new upcoming programming that will be coming out and be joining up with our network. Definitely go and check all that out. All right, let's get into it. Starting with the Dow, which was down to 30,981.33. And a lot of that was coming, and some investors bracing for what it is that we saw off the inflation report just now. It's kind of hard to justify putting more and more money into a company when the money that's going to get spent there is worth less and less. So that you're going to jack prices or let people go or sit back and brace for a lower profit margin for their investors, especially under a shrinking dollar. So yeah, it would not make sense to stay into the markets right now. Note, this is not official financial advice. Always check with your official financial advisor, somebody who's licensed to do this for you, what is going to be the best for you. But that's what we see coming off of that. Looking into the Bitcoin. The Bitcoin is at $19,852 US dollars and 20 US cents across the 5-day. It's been a little bit of a whipsaw. Looks like it tried to climb itself back up overnight and then just slammed back down into this, partially probably becoming because of the inflation report. Yeah, let's go back out to the 1 day there. Actually, let me get a refresh off of that. Yeah, it dumped from 20,034.10 at 12:30 p.m. I don't know what this time is, or what time zone they're pulling us back out of, but dumped all the way back down to 1954, and then it's climbed a little bit back up to 123.50. So continue to watch that. If you have Bitcoin in your portfolio, well, you're probably looking a little bit rough right now, but I mean, I'm telling you right now, once again, not official financial advice, but I have no intention on getting rid of my Shiba, my Doge, or my Bitcoin in any point in the near future right now. I have no intention on doing any of that. In fact, if it keeps going much, much lower, I might get a little bit more. So that's what we see off of that. And the gas. Another slight drop. 397 in the Sun Prairie area. We're still seeing some 398s around there. 399 around the rest of the Madison area. Nothing on the chart for the Madison proper area, but is likely still in the very, very low fours, 403. It's 418 down by where I'm at right now. So something to watch for, and we are getting some reprieve on that as well. So we will continue to watch that and see what happens with that. All right, let's grab one from Investors Business Daily. Dow Futures struggling stock market rally faces key inflation report as U.S. oil prices crash. This was last updated before the inflation report came out, so some of the information here might be outdated. This is from Scott Latonin. Dow Futures were higher following Tuesday's stock market fall as U.S. oil prices crashed below $96 a barrel. A key inflation report, the Consumer Price Index, is due out before Wednesday's stock market open. Early Wednesday earnings reports from Delta and Fastenal were on tap. Banking giants JP Morgan Chase and Morgan Stanley, along with Taiwan Semiconductor, will report on Thursday morning. Citigroup, Dow Jones stock, United Health, and Wells Fargo wrap up the trading week with earnings reports on Friday morning. Before Wednesday's open, Dow futures rose 0.1%. S&P 500 futures gained 0.2%, and the NASDAQ were up Oh, they forgot the decimal point. Given what we're seeing against the other futures, I'm going to say that is 0.3%. That seems reasonable. Remember, overnight action in Dow futures and elsewhere doesn't necessarily translate into actual trading in the next regular stock market session. The 10-year yield ticked lower to 2.95 Tuesday, following Monday's drop to 2.99. Meanwhile, U.S. oil prices crashed more than 8%, with West Texas Intermediate trading below $96 a barrel. Thank you! The Labor Department's Consumer Price Index is due out Wednesday morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Consumer prices are expected to rise 1.1% in June. Per Econoday estimates, inflation is expected to surge 8.8% in June from a year ago, up from May's 8.6% year-over-year rise. What's that? You undershot the mark again? 8.8% was too low again? So that's what Dow Jones was saying as of 7:10 this morning. Let's grab one from Reuters quick. Wall Street tumbles at close as worries mount ahead of CPI report. From Stephen Culp. Man, okay. I'm getting a new Dow tab up here because we're going to watch this once the market's open. We'll be checking in with that throughout the show. That's not what I wanted. Yeah, we'll be watching that. Still nobody's reporting on the CPI report. Except for Disclose.tv. All right. This is from Stephen Culp. Wall Street ended in negative territory on Tuesday as growing signs of recession kept buyers out of the equities market ahead of inflation data. While all three major U.S. stock indices seesawed between modest gains and losses earlier in the session, they turned sharply lower late in the day as Wednesday's consumer prices report from the Labor Department drew near, with big bank earnings looming later on in the week. Ooh, that's going to be a rough one too. Investors are waiting to hear what happens with CPI and earnings, said Brett Schutte, Chief Investment Officer at Northwestern Mutual Wealth Management Company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. For several months, we've swung back and forth between inflation fears and recession fears almost on a daily basis. We've really confused investors who have chosen to go on a buyer strike, Schutte added. I don't hear many people saying, buy the dip. Although I'm sure, Schutte, that you're probably begging people to say, buy the dip. While the CPI report is expected to show inflation gathered heat in June, the so-called core CPI, which strips away volatile food and energy prices, is seen offering further confirmation that inflation has peaked, which could potentially convince the Federal Reserve to ease on its policy tightening in autumn. See, you said that it peaked last month. And the month before that, when it actually went down slightly, you said the inflation worries were over. Paul Kim, Chief Executive Officer at Simplify ETFs in New York, expects year-on-year top-line CPI to be in the high 8 or potentially even 9% range. And with inflation that high, the Fed only has one thing in mind. Worries that overly aggressive moves by the Fed to rein in decades-high inflation could push the economy over the brink of a recession were exacerbated by the steepest inversion of the 2-year and 10-year Treasury yields since at least March 2010, a potential signal of near-term risk and economic contraction. I'm sorry, there's no way we're not there, unless they honk the numbers so hard to try to save this midterm. The market expects the central bank to raise the key Fed funds target rate by 75 basis points, thus keeping you, the consumer, out of the market, but letting the government continue to spend however much they want to spend. At the conclusion of its July policy meeting, which would mark its third consecutive interest rate hike. The Dow fell 192.51, or 0.62%, to 3981.33. The S&P lost 35.63 points, or up about 1% to 38.18.8, and the Nasdaq dropped 107.87, or again about 1% to 11.264.73. All 11 major sectors of the S&P fell, with energy shares weighing down by plunging crude prices suffering the largest percentage loss. The second quarter reporting season will hit full stride later this week as JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo and Company post results. See, here's the thing. Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, Citigroup, all these big banks, and even your local bank, Bank of Bum Screw, still trying to get into use to appealing to the AM radio audience, Bank of Bumblescum, Georgia. They all make all their money off being able to lend out your money and get interest rates back with what you have in savings. There does have to be a tangible amount of money on the balance sheet for them to both lend out and then also be able to bring back in. Otherwise, they've got to go back and borrow from the Fed at a loss, especially at 0.75 basis points at a loss. If we're starting to see these rate hikes, on top of people taking their savings out of the bank because they need to spend it on food, that is going to hurt for their earnings season. I'm a little bit concerned with what this is going to do to the markets as well. As of Friday, analysts saw an aggregate annual S&P earnings growth of 5.7% for the April to June period, down from 6.8% forecast at the beginning of the quarter, according to Refinitiv. PepsiCo got the ball rolling this week by beating its quarterly earnings estimates and announced it could increase prices amid resilient demand. Shares of Boeing jumped 7.4% after the plane maker's June aircraft deliveries hit the highest monthly level since March of 2019. And I have no idea who's buying those aircraft because there aren't a whole lot of, well, there are more people flying than there were in 2020, but still, there aren't a whole lot of people that are still willing to go back and fly. So we'll see what happens with that and where that goes. Let's grab a couple more out of the inflationary side of things, just to see if we can't filibuster long enough for the mainstream guys to come out and tell us about the CPI report. The New York Post, looming June inflation data release has White House on defensive from Thomas Barabi. President Biden and White House officials are expected to come under renewed pressure on Wednesday as the latest consumer price index is expected to show another decades-high inflation reading in the month of June. Economists expect Labor Department's latest CPI reading hit 8.8% compared to the same month 1 year earlier, according to Dow Jones data, which was 4.2% compared to 1 year before that. That would mark the fastest pace of increase since 1981 as Americans pay abnormally high prices for everyday staples such as gas, food, and rent. White House officials made a preemptive attempt at damage control ahead of the release. Top Biden economic officials Brian Deese and Cecilia Rouse noted the data will largely not reflect the substantial declines in gas prices we've seen since the middle of June, according to a memo circulated by reporters on Tuesday obtained by MarketWatch. White House Press Secretary, token diversity hire, acknowledged during her briefing that the headline number for June's CPI reading was expected to be highly elevated due to gas prices last month. Yeah, that's the damage control they're trying to run with this right now. Oh, well, this is already outdated because the gas prices came down at the very, very end of the month. And I don't buy it. The president's number one... Wait, no, this is token diversity hire. The president's number one economic priority is tackling inflation and looking ahead. There are a number of reasons why we expect those high prices to ease over the coming months, Diversity Hire said. Republican lawmakers and other critics have repeatedly slammed Biden over his handling of the inflation crisis, arguing his policies and failed efforts to date have contributed to the problem. Decades-high inflation readings have weighed on Biden's approval rating. Dude, he has no approval rating yet. And that's part of the reason we're starting to see them try to divorce themselves from him for the midterms because, well, they don't want him to run again for 2024 because they're going to throw the age question at him, but also they can go and let him be the lightning rod and still go back to their constituents and say, no, it's him, it's definitely not us. But they are full on the defensive right now. From Yahoo Finance, inflation data already out of date, White House downplays CPI expectations. From Ben Werschkow, With gas prices tumbling and tentative hopes that the U.S. inflation might have peaked, you'd think the White House would eagerly await the upcoming release of new data on consumer prices for June. Not so much. President Biden's aides have aggressively downplayed expectations for Wednesday's consumer price index release because they say of technical factors in how CPI measures things like gas prices. June CPI data is already out of date, White House Secretary Token Diversity Hire declared during Monday's press briefing. National gas price currently average $4.65 a gallon, down from over $5 a gallon a month ago. The White House expects the highly watched headline number to be elevated because of backwards-looking data that won't account for the price drops of recent weeks. Biden officials would rather the public focus instead on indicators such as last week's positive jobs report and upcoming data on personal consumption expenditures. The Federal Reserve's favored measure of inflation set to be released at the end of July. Do keep in mind that the positive jobs report is also coming on, about the middle of summer student hiring. All right, let's get one last refresh on this, see if they've got something. So we've got 12 hours ago, MarketWatch says U.S. June inflation report circulating on the internet is fake. Bureau of Labor Statistics says, which was at 8:03 last night when people were talking about 8.8%. But here we have from the USA Today. Bring it over here. Inflation hits new 40-year high as gas, food, rent costs surge. Another big rate hike appears likely, from Paul Davidson. Inflation jumped again in June on a persistent climb in gas, food, and rent costs, notching another 40-year high and likely solidifying the Federal Reserve's plans for another big rate hike this month. Prices increased 9.1% from a year earlier, up from an annual rate of 8.6% in the prior month, and the largest gain since November of 1981, when they changed how they measure things. The Labor Department's Consumer Price Index showed Wednesday. Economists surveyed by Bloomberg had estimated inflation would rise 8.8%. You were wrong! On a monthly basis, consumer prices increased 1.3% compared to a 1% rise in May. The report bolsters the Federal Reserve's plans to raise its key interest rates by a hefty 0.75 percentage point for the second straight month as part of an aggressive campaign to curtail inflation and once again to keep you out of the market, to keep you from buying that house, from taking out that credit card, from spending that money, from buying that car. While the government continues to spend money, and we'll talk about that in just a second. June's surge again was led by gas prices, which increased 11.2% and 59.9% annually. The good news is unleaded regular averaged $4.65 Tuesday, down from $5 a month ago. Groceries rose 1% and 12.2% over the past 12 months. Both gas and food costs have been elevated, largely because Russia's war in Ukraine has disrupted global supplies of oil, wheat, corn, and other commodities. Oh, just wait. Just wait till you start seeing the food prices once the harvest comes back in, given the fact that A, we can't get the imports out of the places we typically got imports from, and B, the fact that fertilizer and fuel, by the way, became so much more expensive this year over last year. Just you wait. This hasn't even scratched the surface yet of how bad it's going to get. But one thing I want to point out, if you want a real world number, I used this before when we first started talking about inflation last year, when it started getting excessive. Most of you guys know I have been on and off keto pretty much since the time that we started Contemporary. I'm currently off it right now. I am lowering my carbs to a point, but I'm not going a strict low carb right now just because I work out a lot. And while I'm working out, if I'm on keto, my heart rate goes up further than I would like to see it. And if I'm getting some of my energy from sugars, it doesn't seem to go up as much. That's health issues that we're not interested in. I like to use a processed cheese product, salsa con queso or queso dip. I prefer the Tostitos one. I get it from Quick Trip. because that was the best one where you could get it without. That was the best place you get it without the salsa in it. And I mentioned this again. It was last year when we started talking about the inflation rising, when we started to see the 3%, the 4.2%, the 5%, etc. last year. When I saw for the first time last year that the Tostitos cheese had gone from $3.99 to $4.39. That same jar in the same Quick Trip that I bought it from yesterday when I went to go get some, I went with another brand because it was cheaper, but it is up to $5.39 for the same thing I got for $3.99 2 years ago. $5.39 we're at. Over 2 years. And their competitor, the off-brand, is up to $4.99. The one that I wound up getting. Which was Old Dutch, I believe. I don't know if you guys have Old Dutch everywhere. I think you have Tostitos just about everywhere. I don't know if you have Old Dutch everywhere. But the Old Dutch brand is $4.99. And the Tostitos is $5.39. Both jars were $3.99. In March of last year. And all those prices are expected to go up. So we'll continue to watch this and see where this goes. They haven't adjusted the markets yet. Now, what could be driving this? You know, they've officially taken us all back up out of the markets right now. So what could be driving monetary policy like this? And what could be driving monetary policy to go up? Because you're not spending any more money. Oh, wait. Let's read one from Ian Miles Chong here. Still Gray, says the Biden admin, has announced another $1.7 billion in aid to Ukraine. Let's listen.
We are following breaking news here at the live desk coming in just out of the nation's capital. The U.S. announcing a new $1.7 billion in aid to help Ukraine, specifically to help pay health care workers still trying to treat patients even after hospitals have been bombed or closed because of Russia's invasion. The money is strictly for humanitarian purposes, coming from the U.S. Agency for International Development, the Treasury Department, and the World Bank. Just last week, the U.S. announced it was sending $400 million in military equipment to Ukraine as well. We are following breaking news here at the live desk coming in just out of the...
There you go, another $1.7 billion of your money going to the Ukraine. Hey look, recent claims of U.S. Supreme Court ruling on 2020 presidential election results are false according to the fact checker. I wonder what they're trying to run through and ram through right now. Let's read a little bit about what's happening in Ukraine. U.S. sends $1.7 billion in aid to pay Ukraine's healthcare workers. Gee, I wonder what could be inflating the currency. From Matt Berg. Ukraine will receive another $1.7 billion in aid from the U.S. and the World Bank to pay healthcare workers' salaries and provide other essential services, the Associated Press reported on Tuesday. The latest round of aid provided by the U.S. Agency for International Development, the Treasury Department, and the World Bank aims to address an acute budget deficit caused by the ongoing Russian invasion. The AP reported so far USAID has provided $4 billion in budgetary support to Ukraine. While some hospitals in Ukraine have been shut down or bombed, many healthcare workers have opted to remain in the war-torn country. Paying the workers has become increasingly difficult due to the overwhelming burden of war, Viktor Lyashko, Ukraine's Minister of Health, said in a statement. Lyashko underscores the importance of contentious financial support from the West as the war rages on. The aid is not yet just another financial support, it's an investment that makes us a step closer to victory, he said in a statement. Previous funds from the U.S. have been earmarked for keeping gas and electricity running in hospitals and schools, securing humanitarian aid for citizens, and paying salaries of civil servants and teachers, the Associated Press reported. This aid will help Ukraine's democratic government provide essential services for the people of Ukraine, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said in a statement. Tens of billions of dollars have been allocated for the U.S. to support Ukraine since the war began late in February. Much of that support has been dedicated to the country's military, sending weapons and ammunition to stave off Russian troops. So another $1.7 billion is going over there. Meanwhile, you can't go get a mortgage right now because the interest rate's about to be 6.5%. I know, I must be some Putin puppet shill if I don't support going and spending every bit of taxpayer dollars and inflationary dollars we have over to Ukraine. But, oh man, I need to understand. I need to have somebody explain it to me. How we've come to a point where this is acceptable. I need this explained to me. Can somebody do that? Seriously? Here's one for you. This may seem a little bit more base than usual. Speaking of foreign news, before we get into the local stuff here, from the Associated Press, hold on. From the Associated Press, UN projects world population will reach 8 billion on November 15th. From Edith M. Lederer. The UN estimated Monday that the world's population will reach 8 billion on November 15th and that India will replace China as the world's most populous nation next year. Isn't India smaller than China too? Let's get the world map up here. I know these maps aren't completely accurate. But according to this, I mean, India appears to be considerably smaller than China. And also is, like they said, the most populous nation in the world now. So I'm not sure quite where they're putting all those people, but they're finding somewhere, apparently. Let's see. In a report released on World Population Day, the UN also said global population growth fell below 1% in 2020 for the first time since 1950. Gotta get those numbers up, guys. Pump them up. All of you in the chat, go have more kids. According to the latest UN projections, the world's population could grow around 8.5 billion in 2030, 9.7 billion in 2050, and peak of around 10.4 billion during the 2080s. It's forecast to remain at that level until 2100. Come on, get those numbers up, guys. The report says more than half the projected increases in population up to 2050 will be concentrated in just 8 countries. The Congo, Egypt, Ethiopia, India, Nigeria, Pakistan, the Philippines, and Tanzania. Once again, those of you of European diaspora, but also those of you with the American sense of liberty, get those numbers up. The report, World Population Prospects 2022, puts the world's population at 7.942 billion now and forecasts it will reach 8 billion in mid-November. John Wilmot, director of the UN Population Division, said at a news conference to release the report that the date when the UN's projection line will cross 8 billion is November 15th, but he noted, "We do not pretend that's the actual date, and we think that the uncertainty is at least plus or minus a year." Well, I think I speak for all of us when I quote King James and say, "And you, be ye fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth, and multiply therein." Genesis chapter 9, verse 7. Go forth and fill all corners of the world. Ed heads. All right, let's talk about Uvalde. So we're going to start here with an archived link from KView because they do so much autoplay, but I do have some video here. There was video in this, and KView has actually blurred parts of the video because of sensitivity. And if we do need to, I will go and pull up the original back over in another window and we'll watch the video there. But I've also got video from Breaking 911 and The Blaze, so we'll be looking at some of that. But we'll read from this, from KView News staff. Hallway footage in Uvalde school shooting obtained by KView. As of Tuesday, July 12th, state and local leaders have not released video from inside Robb Elementary School on the day of the 18-year-old gunman freely entered the school and holed up in a classroom where he killed 19 students and 2 teachers. The video was obtained by Austin American-Statesman and KView senior reporter Tom Plohetsky. Both media outlets have elected to release that footage on Tuesday to provide transparency to the community, showing what happened as officials waited to enter that classroom. Below is a breakdown of what that full video shows. Initially, the video shows a truck crashing outside of Robb Elementary School on May 24th, and the 18-year-old gunman walking to the school building. The video then shows the gunman entering the school and walking down the hallway to a classroom carrying a long gun. 5 seconds later, after the gunman turns the corner, the video shows the young boy come into frame. The boy witnesses the first gunshots in the school before running away, presumably unharmed. The shooter did not appear to see the boy based on the video. The video then shows the gunman start shooting towards the classroom before walking in. Between gunfire, screams can be heard from the teachers and students inside the classroom. The video shows the first armed law enforcement officers arrive in the school hallway 3 minutes after the gunman. The officers are seen running towards the classroom, but they take fire and end up back at the end of the hallway. In the video, 13 rifles can be seen arriving in the hallway, dozens in the first 30 minutes of the incident. The first shield arrives in under 20 minutes. Dozens of law enforcement officers can be seen in the hallway along with the equipment. No officers make entry into the classroom for more than 70 minutes. Governor Abbott, State Rep Dustin Burrows, who chairs the House Committee investigating the Uvalde shooting, Texas DPS leaders, and many victims' families have publicly called for the video's release. So, if we have to, again, I will go pull the KView article back up and we'll watch it from there, but let's start by watching from The Blaze. The gunman in the crash vehicle fires 3 shots at 2 men who approach the crash scene. Back that up just a little bit, because we can see there he goes. And like I said, he was booking, just like I said right from the beginning. He was cruising when he hit that ditch and broke the axle out of his truck. The gunman in the crash vehicle fires 3 shots at 2 men who approach the crash scene. A teacher called 911. Bystander video captures the gunman entering the school. And there is the security camera footage of him entering the school as well. Let me back this up just a bit more.
Get in your room! Get in your room!
And just happening to hit the door that's unlocked. Remember, one of the concerns is that most of the doors to the outside of the school were locked, but this one happened to be propped open, allowing him entry in a very quick manner. He didn't go to a bunch of different doors. He just happened to pick the one that was unlocked. Editor's note on this, the sound of children screaming has been removed. So this in and of itself bothers me. This guy just casually checking his phone. Finger outside the trigger guard. Pointed downward like, I wonder what's happening. So they set up the shields and then they just sit back there and hold back. And this seems to be what's got everybody up in arms here. You know, these guys are going out here in a line going towards this classroom. And here's this guy just randomly sanitizing his hands. Are you serious? But I want to focus on a couple of things that went along with this, and some of these are the time jumps. So they pulled this out here. The police enter the school. We talked about this dude just randomly checking his phone. Then we've got a 4-minute time jump off of this. And a 19, which means we've already skipped and gone through 23 minutes. And then add another 31. 23, 31, 54. A full hour of just standing here behind shields. And then 36 minutes after that. Still no rescue attempt happens. Now, it's hard for me to come back and armchair quarterback with this because I wasn't there. And it does appear, according to transcripts with this, one of the officers that was here, the one that was being held back as we were looking, had kids in the classroom. But I can't wrap my head around the concept of not putting yourself in harm's way for the kids, especially after you've heard it's been 40 minutes and this kid's still coming out and firing off 4 more shots. I cannot wrap my head around that. I can't say what I would do in this situation, but I cannot imagine in my psychology that this would be it. There's got to be some sort of protective instinct in somebody's head to say, hey, I might die, but it might cause some kids to live. This video will likely rekindle criticism against the police response to the shootings. Yeah, no, this is not criticism. These police should be in prison right now. Critics say there's evidence the police could have acted earlier to accost the shooter that could have possibly saved some lives that were lost. Unless, of course, they were looking to maximize destruction. Honk honk. We got some more from Breaking 911. I don't know if this is going to be as cut down or not. Nope, this is the exact same video. CNN weighing in on this. Video from Uvalde school shooting shows gunmen enter school and officers in hallway retreat after taking fire. From Rosa Flores, Rosalina Nieves, Andy Rose, and Stephen Almasi. The Austin American-Statesman newspaper published Tuesday edited portions of school surveillance video showing officers retreating from gunfire in the hallway of Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas during the fatal shooting on May 24th. Is there any way that we can see the full video? I want to see what happens in these jump cuts. The edited video on the newspaper's website is just more than 4 minutes long and first shows teachers screaming as the gunman crosses the parking lot of Robb Elementary School after crashing a truck just outside the property. Once the gunman enters the building at 11:33 a.m., hallway surveillance cameras show him walking down the hallway uncontested with a semi-auto rifle. Gunfire is heard as the gunman enters the classroom, and a child on the other end of the hallway is seen running. The newspaper says it removed the sounds of children's screams from the video. I'm a little bit suspicious of that. I don't know, because the little bit of editing that I do just involves basically doing jump cuts and taking the ums and ands out of solo videos, but I don't know what the technology is that allows us to hear the gunshots but not be able to hear the children's screams. Some of this says staged to me, but again, it's because I don't know the technology, not necessarily because I believe there's no way to do it. So if anybody has any insights on that, leave them in the chat. Let's see. The first shots that appeared to be directed at responding officers are heard at 11:37 a.m., sending the officers immediately running down to the other end of the hallway in retreat. Multiple officers are seen with their guns drawn in the hallway, but are not seen approaching the classroom again until 12:21 p.m. After 4 more rounds were heard from the gunman. The officers do not directly confront the gunman again until 12:50 p.m. when authorities say the gunman was killed by law enforcement. The gunman fatally shot 19 students and 2 teachers. The surveillance video comes amid lingering outrage and questions over the police response to the shooting. What officers were doing in the 77 minutes while they were sanitizing their hands. After the shooting started, it had been largely unclear. Some officers have questioned the trustworthiness of the various investigations, working to understand what went wrong that day. The newspaper later published a second edited video. The second video, posted to the newspaper's YouTube channel, lasts nearly an hour and a half, and the audio is also edited. Is there anywhere where we can get the raw video? Look, I don't want to hear kids screaming any more than anything else. Anybody else does. I don't want to hear that because that would disturb the hell out of me. But the problem that I have with this is I've seen so many fakes and so many narrative bending things out here. And so many people trying to convince other people to believe something that isn't true, that I really do need to see the raw video in order to trust it anymore. I do have questions. At a city council meeting in Uvalde, Mayor Don McLaughlin said the newspaper's actions were one of the most chicken things I've ever seen. Some parts of the video should not have been released, he added. No, the full video should be released, unedited. You want to get closure for this? Release the full unedited video. Let everybody see just how much of cowards these people were. So, I don't know. What do you guys think about this? What you've seen so far? But we'll see what happens. While we're in the midst of pure evil, which appears to be what the police officers were doing, friend of the show, Brady Leonard. I see that pure evil is on the menu today. From 2 tweets, one of which we'll be talking about. One here, screenshotted from Greg Price, says, Warren, crisis pregnancy centers that are there to fool people looking for pregnancy termination help outnumber abortion clinics by 3 to 1. We need to shut them down all around the country. If you're going to a crisis pregnancy center, you're not looking to kill your kid. I'm sorry. This isn't 1992. You can research and know what you're going to before you go there. And the other one that we're going to be talking about, Tapper. I don't know if I agree with you, and with all due respect, one doesn't have to be brilliant to attempt a coup. Bolton. I disagree with that as somebody who's helped plan coups. Not here, but other places. Well, that's just about pure evil now, isn't it? But everything that we already knew about John Bolton to begin with anyway. From the Daily Wire, John Bolton casually admits he's planned coups before, from Virginia Kruta. And guess what? We have video. It's a deepfake! Former National Security Advisor John Bolton admitted during a Tuesday CNN interview that he had helped plan coups d'etats in the past. Bolton joined the lead anchor Jake Tapper to discuss ongoing January 6th committee hearings, and the two appeared to be at odds over whether the riot that unfolded that day on Capitol Hill had been the result of a carefully planned coup attempt or simply happenstance. Let's listen.
Well, when it comes to his personal advantage, the answer is he doesn't listen to anybody else. But I think it's also important to understand, while nothing Donald Trump did after the election in connection with the lie about the election fraud, none of it is defensible. None of it is defensible. It's also a mistake, as some people have said, including on the committee, the commentators, that somehow this was a carefully planned coup d'etat aimed at the Constitution. That's not the way Donald Trump does things. It's rambling from one half-vast idea to another, one plan that falls through and another comes up. That's what he was doing. As I say, none of it defensible. But you have to understand the nature of what the problem of Donald Trump is. He's, to use a Star Wars metaphor, a disturbance in the force. And it's not an attack on our democracy. It's Donald Trump looking out for Donald Trump. It's a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence.
I don't know that I agree with you. To be fair, with all due respect, one doesn't have to be brilliant to attempt a coup.
I disagree with that. As somebody who has helped plan coup d'etat, not here, but other places, it takes a lot of work, and that's not what he did. It was just stumbling around from one idea to another. Ultimately, he did unleash the rioters at the Capitol. As to that, there's no doubt. But not to overthrow the Constitution, to buy more time to throw the matter back to the states to try and redo the issue. And if you don't believe that, you're going to overreact. And I think that's a real risk for the committee, which has done a lot of good work, mostly when the witnesses testify, not when the members are opining. It is invariably the case that when you go too far trying to prove your case, you undermine it. And I think you got to give credit to the intelligence of the American people to listen to the witnesses and let them come to the conclusion.
So there you go. Bolton has planned a coup d'etat. Why did he do it? So they can go spell more weapons to both sides in various theaters across the world. He's so casual about it, too. Let's read this op-ed from the Washington Post. Where democracy goes to die in darkness. Opinion: shocking new Trump revelations may actually move a few GOP voters. Which one? From Greg Sargent. The opinions of this article do not reflect the opinions of the Washington Post, but the author who writes them, they also do not reflect the opinions of Turns of Pages Productions, Contemporary, or the host. As you watch explosive revelations pour forth about Donald Trump and his fellow cool plotters at Tuesday's congressional hearing on the insurrection, keep this number in mind, 19. That's the paltry percentage of GOP voters who believe Trump's effort to overturn the 2020 election threatened American democracy. That's the Cheneyites, by the way. According to a new poll from the New York Times and Siena College, the poll surveyed Republicans who plan to vote in 2024 presidential primaries. I'm pretty sure that all the people that they've interviewed for this are the people who say, I used to be a Republican, but then Trump broke me. Liz Cheney comes to mind. By contrast, this poll finds that 75% of GOP primary voters believe that Trump was just exercising his right to contest the election. Trump employed extraordinary corruption and mob violence in an effort to destroy our political order, and by 75 to 19, GOP voters say this was perfectly within the bounds of democratic conduct. Don't make me go start finding the video of all the times that Democrats have contested a Republican election. If the January 6th House Select Committee hopes to create a kind of breakthrough moment, a broad bipartisan consensus that the conduct of Trump and his coup plotters was fundamentally unacceptable in democracy, then that poll finding is a dark reminder that this won't happen. And yet, if a sliver of GOP voters out there is persuadable on this point, That might be an opening. It dangles at least the possibility that pro-democracy majority can be broadened a bit here and there in strategic ways that could make a difference in the margins. The revelations at Tuesday's committee hearing should make it impossible to cling to the lie that in trying to subvert this law, Trump was merely exercising his legal options. That's because the hearing will include videotape testimony given to the committee by Trump's White House counsel, Pat Cipollone. Hey, who paid Pat Cipollone's debts, by the way? We don't know exactly what Cipollone testified to behind closed doors, and neither will anybody else in the world, except for the people who took the recording, because it will be heavily selectively edited to show what Liz Cheney wants you to believe, so that her family and the Bush family can come back into power. But the committee says he provided information that's highly relevant to Trump's misconduct on every front. Remember, Cipollone warned against many of Trump's most corrupt moves. Those include pressure on Justice Department to manufacture impressions of a fraudulent election, efforts to use fake electors to game the presidential electoral count in Congress, and the pressure on his vice president to subvert that count. Anybody ever question how it was that they were able to build a gallows in D.C. with cameras everywhere and nobody noticing it until it was already up? That's what I have questions about. A useful explanation of all this comes from Sarah Longwell, an ever-Trump GOP strategist who conducts focus groups of Republican voters. The Times reports that Longwell's group, the Republican Accountability PAC, will spend at least $10 million in the midterms to defeat GOP candidates who are essentially running on Trump's insurrectionist energies. The few GOP voters receptive to the truth about Trump and January 6 are critical to those efforts. Longwell says, so who are they? They're, for the most part, Bushite Republicans who want to go on a globalist agenda, who want to go back out and kill brown kids in various foreign theaters forever because they're told that this is how they spread Christianity throughout the world. I know who these people are. Let me see if we can find this video. July 11th. Oh, it's pinned. That's easy enough. Well, let's listen to the Republican Accountability Project.
I am a registered lifelong Republican.
I joined the Republican Party about 45 years ago.
I think Doug Mastriano is one of the scariest politicians I've seen.
The people who joined 45 years ago and just voted blindly are part of the issue because they've gone through Nixon, Bush's, Ford. They tried to elect Cheney, Romney. You start to see where some of these problems are coming into. Dole, there's another one.
He took busloads of people to January 6th. He was there himself.
Completely inappropriate for any politician.
His whole campaign centered on the election was stolen from Donald Trump.
Every court that has looked at it has said that's not true.
And now he will stop all mail ballots.
He wants to throw everyone off the voter rolls and make us all re-register. This is completely...
You should all have to re-register every 2 years. I'm sorry, I know that's unpopular. Oh, it's so hard to go back out and register and it takes so much time and paperwork. No, you should all have to re-register every 2 years. Clear the voter rolls after every midterms. That way you will know who has deceased, who has moved. Who has become a felon. Yes, you should all be thrown off the voter rolls. And I will not move on that either, by the way.
Preposterous.
Mastriano wants to ban abortion entirely, making no exceptions for rape, incest, or the life of the mother. That's unacceptable.
So many bad things that Mastriano has proposed. It's unbelievable.
Crazy conspiracy theories. I would vote for a dog before I voted for him.
I cannot in good conscience vote for him.
Josh Shapiro is an honest individual with integrity.
I will definitely.
Shapiro, huh? No reason.
Vote Shapiro in November.
Josh Shapiro in November.
Republican Accountability PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
There's
only 19% of Republicans that don't support Trump. We need to tape the eyes of the other Republicans open so they can watch the January 6th committee, then they'll all change their minds again. So just the news tells us 7 whoppers peddled by House Democrats, January 6th committee. Let's listen to what that is. I really got to get rid of the Buy Me a Coffee link. Just because they've eliminated all functionality at this point. I just looked over and noticed that it's still there. This is from Natalia Mittelstadt. House Democrats' January 6th committee showcased numerous false allegations over the course of its hearings and investigations that have since been debunked and in some cases withdrawn. The committee, which is made up of Democrats and 2 anti-Trump Republicans, handpicked by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, has promoted inaccuracies and falsehoods regarding people and events, weaving a narrative about the January 6th selfie fest, even refusing to back down from some of its allegations despite contradictory evidence. Below are 7 whoppers the committee's peddled to the American public. Number 1, Trump incited the riot. The second impeachment of former President Trump was based on the Democrats' claim that Trump incited the Capitol riot with his speech at the January 6th Stop the Steal rally at the Ellipse in D.C. The Democrats are still promoting this claim in the January 6th committee, despite abundant evidence to the contrary. The intelligence community learned more than 2 weeks prior to the riot that there would potentially be violence on January 6th. Trump didn't meet the legal threshold for incitement, and according to the timeline of events, the Capitol was breached before Trump's speech ended. 2. The deployment of the National Guard on January 6th was delayed. Both the Defense Department Inspector General and Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Mark Milley said the National Guard wasn't delayed on its deployment. The DoD had offered to make the National Guard available 4 days before the riot, but was rebuffed by then Capitol Police Chief Steve Sund. Sund later reversed his position, but his belated request for guard troops was denied by Senate Sergeant-at-Arms Michael Stenger and House Sergeant-at-Arms Paul Irving. Trump, however, signed the order on January 4th to deploy 20,000 guardsmen if requested by Congress. I still don't like the fact that they keep going to that. Both Democrats, Republicans, and Trump himself wanted to turn the U.S. military on its own people. I don't care what the situation was. That's just wrong. Ex-NYPD Commissioner Bernie Kerik was in D.C. on January 5th for meetings to discuss the overturning of the 2020 election results. In the transmitted letter with the subpoena served by Kerik by the committee, it provided 3 citations with its allegations that Kerik was at the nation's capital on January 5th. However, none of those citations claimed Kerik attended such a meeting. According to Kerik's phone and toll booth records, he was in New York City for a family emergency that day. The committee later admitted it had made an error. 4. Scott Perry of Pennsylvania asked Trump for a presidential pardon regarding the January 6th. The vice chair of the panel, Rep. Liz Cheney, out of a job, Wyoming, claimed that Perry contacted the White House in the weeks after January 6th to seek a presidential pardon. Both Perry and Trump spokeswoman Liz Harrington disputed the claim. Perry said that he was in the Capitol doing my legislative duties on January 6th, and that the notion that I ever sought a presidential pardon for myself or other members of Congress is an absolute shameless and soulless lie. Harrington said that she talked with multiple people regarding Cheney's claim about Perry, and they all said it wasn't accurate. Five, Barry Loudermark led a recon mission inside the Capitol. The Capitol Police refuted this allegation, citing an exhaustive review of security footage that turned up no evidence that Loudermilk entered the Capitol with constituents on January 5th. The congressman was with the tour only in the Rayburn House office, building across the street from the Capitol. Ron Johnson was involved in a conspiracy to force alternate electors on Vice President Pence. Johnson never handed slates of alternate electors to Pence, as alleged. Rather, Johnson's staff received an urgent request regarding the alternate slates of electors for Michigan and Wisconsin, asked Pence's staff about it, and stood down after the vice president's aides said they already knew about it and the information was supposed to have arrived in the mail. And 7. Trump tried to grab the steering wheel of a presidential vehicle to divert it to the Capitol. Cassidy Hutchinson, a former junior aide, told the committee that she heard this account from a White House Deputy Chief of Staff Operations for Tony Ornato. Hutchinson also testified Trump lunged for the Secret Service agent Robert Engel after trying to grab the steering wheel, and that Engel was allegedly in the room when Ornato conveyed the account. However, the Secret Service said that Trump didn't lunge for the steering wheel or Engel. Ornato, Engel, and the presidential vehicle driver said that they would testify under oath to dispute Hutchinson's testimony. But hey, who has time for truth when you're trying to honk a 2024 election? From CNN, 8 takeaways from the January 6th hearing, day 7. From Marshall Cohen, Jeremy Herb, and Zachary Cohen. The latest hearing from the House Unselect Committee investigating the January 6th Selfie Fest fleshed out the links between former President Trump and the far-right extremist groups that were the vanguard of the violent effort to stop the transition of power and keep him in office despite his election loss. The hearing on Tuesday focused on the loose affiliations between Trump, his informal political advisors, and members of the militia groups like the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, the Glow Keepers, and the Pride Boys. The committee walked through snippets and witness depositions, but, of course, not the full depositions, just selectively edited clips to come back out and make the narrative that they want to make without any pushback. Court documents, previously unseen emails, and other materials to make the case that Trump coyly courted these militants and saw them as his troops on the ground to pressure Congress to overturn the 2020 election. Here are some of the takeaways. Panel highlights Trump's call to arms tweet. The panel repeatedly highlighted a Trump tweet from December of 2020, which said was a galvanizing call to arms that motivated his supporters to come to Washington and disrupt the transition of power. The tweet claimed that it was statistically impossible to have lost the 2020 election and that there would be a big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Trump infamously added, "Be there, will be wild." Stephanie Murphy, a Florida Democrat who led part of the hearing, said that the post was a call to action. No, it wasn't. And in some cases, it's a call to arms for many of the President Trump's most loyal supporters, citing comments from many of the rioters and far-right extremists who said that they were inspired by the tweet. If they were inspired by the tweet, that does not prove. After the tweet, pro-Trump groups rescheduled planned protests for late January and switched the date to January 6, according to the committee. Stop the Steal leader Ellie Alexander quickly registered at the website wildprotest.com and used the site as a clearinghouse for information about the protest. Details uncovered for the planning behind Trump's unexpected call to march to the Capitol. The committee showed a draft tweet, which Trump did not send, calling for the march to the Capitol. "I'll be making a big speech at 10 a.m. January 6th at the Ellipse, south of the White House. Please arrive early. Massive crowds expected. March to the Capitol after. Stop the steal," the draft tweet says. The tweet, which the committee obtained from the National Archives, includes a stamp saying "President has seen." In addition, the committee showed a text message obtained from rally organizer Kylie Jane Kramer to right-wing businessman Mike Lindell that said the president would unexpectedly tell his supporters to march to another stage outside the Supreme Court building, which is behind the Capitol. Which is interesting, because that means that this had nothing to do when there was no intent to march to the Capitol. I can also not get out about the march because I'll be in trouble with the National Park Service and the agencies, but POTUS is going to just call for it unexpectedly, Kramer wrote. The role of lawmakers in Trump's election scheme once again featured. Tuesday's hearing focused again on the role of members of Congress played in helping Trump's effort to try to overturn the election. The committee also played audio Tuesday of comments from GOP Rep. Debbie Lesko and audio from January 5th. Lesko asked congressional leadership to come up with a safety plan for members, raising concerns about what would happen on January 6th. A Cipollone interview plays a key role in Tuesday's hearing. Cipollone's testimony was selectively edited and added a top voice to the chorus of former Trump aides who have testified to the committee. They told the president there was no substantial evidence the election was stolen from him. The video clips of Trump's former aides, which have been played throughout the January 6 hearings, have helped the committee illustrate how those around Trump didn't believe his baseless claims about the election, even as he continued to plow ahead with efforts to try to overturn the election. Selectively edited, of course. And of course, the hearsay about the unhinged Oval Office meeting. Yeah, this whole thing is bullshit. Here's an interesting twist to this. From Fox News, January 6th committee, Secret Service agents, Trump staffer have not been contacted after Hutchinson allegations. From David Spunt and Tyler Olson. The January 6th committee still hasn't reached out to key figures in former Trump admin aide Cassidy Hutchinson's explosive testimony, according to a U.S. Secret Service official. Hutchinson last month told the committee that on January 6th, former Trump Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations Tony Ornato told her former President Trump was enraged the U.S. Secret Service wouldn't take him to the Capitol. As he demanded his detail bring him there, Trump tried to grab the steering wheel of the presidential vehicle he was in, Hutchinson said Ornato told her. Hutchinson also said Ornato told her when U.S. Secret Service agent Bobby Engel told Trump to let go of the steering wheel, Trump lunged at him. But a source close to Ornato told Fox News that Ornato was shocked when Hutchinson made the allegation about the steering wheel. That source said that Ornato, Engel, and the driver of the vehicle would be willing to testify to the committee to detail their own accounts of events. Trump himself denied the allegations Hutchinson made in a flurry of posts on his social media network Truth Social. Yet, according to the Secret Service, the committee has not asked Engel, the other Secret Service agent, or Ornato to come testify since Hutchinson's hearing. They're ready to testify and they're waiting by their phones, the source said. Fox News is told an invitation will likely come soon. However, it's not clear if the testimony will be in public or behind the scenes, then released to the public. I'm going to go on a limb and say it's going to be behind the scenes, and then it's going to be, well, I heard that Trump tried to grab the steering wheel from me. Wow. I was trying to drive. That's what I'm pretty sure that this is going to be. Just a jump-cutted mess. I mean, I got a feeling that if they do the testimony behind closed doors, it's going to be like the old ransom letters, where it's going to be one letter, or at this point, one syllable cut out, and then pasted together to make the narrative that they want. The committee did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Monday. The committee also did not respond to a similar request for comment last week. Gee, I wonder why. They haven't been reached out to yet. It's probably the same reason that we mysteriously didn't get the Ginny Thomas testimony, because, hey, she might go off script. Oh, no, it's because she's friends with Liz Cheney. They have mutual friends. No, it's because she might go off the script. She probably said that she wouldn't do it behind closed doors and she would do it only out in front of everybody and live. And they went down and said, man, we can't edit it if it's live. What are we going to do? Posobiec, talking a bit about what we had said about the Supreme Court. Breaking, January 6th committee accidentally presents evidence there was a second stage at the Supreme Court that Trump wanted people to march to. The Supreme Court is directly behind the U.S. Capitol from the ellipse. This revelation debunks the entire insurrection narrative. Jack goes on to say, there was a rally scheduled at 2 p.m. at the Supreme Court. January 6th accidentally proved themselves wrong. This is amazing. So it looks like, and from what I understand, this is actually quite the distance between the two. I don't know, I've never walked it. Because the ellipse should be here, and then this should be, if I remember correctly, is this the reflecting pool? If I understand all this correctly, this is more than an hour march in and of itself to get over here. So even getting over there for 2 would have been a stretch. Either the Donald spoke long or etc. But one of the things that's interesting to this is at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, Trump addressed the March for Trump rally, telling the crowd to go to the Capitol. At 12:53, rioters overwhelmed the Capitol Police, guarding Congress's outer perimeter. Which, if I remember correctly, the Donald was still speaking. When they overwhelmed the Capitol here, but there was another rally that was scheduled for 2 p.m. So, a mass formation psychosis disruptor tweets out, Ray Epps was telling everyone to go to the Capitol after the speeches, and I said, correction, during the speeches. And Mic Drop comes out and corrects me and says, and January 5th. So, not completely sure about that one, but it does cast some doubt, at least into the intent of people to go into the Capitol. mRNA is trending right now. That's probably not a good thing. The January 6th committee has notified the DOJ that Trump tried tampering with one of the witnesses, Cheney says. This is a stretch, by the way. From Brian Schwartz. The House Select Committee investigating the Selfie Fest at the Capitol revealed that it told the Department of Justice that former President Trump contacted one of its witnesses who hasn't publicly testified yet. After our last hearing, President Trump tried to call a witness in our investigation. A witness you have not yet seen in these hearings. Because we're still trying to produce this person, Liz Cheney, the vice chair of the committee, said on Tuesday. That person declined to answer or respond to President Trump's call and instead alerted their lawyer of the call. The lawyer alerted us, and this committee has supplied that information to the DOJ, she added. A spokesperson from Trump did not respond to a request for comments. The Tuesday hearing marked the latest round of testimony that picks Trump as the president, determined to hang on to power after the conclusion of the 2020 election, no matter the cost of the American democracy. Ugh! The editorializing! The committee showcased fresh testimony from several key witnesses. So, this is apparently, allegedly breaking news. But here's the question. Was there a voicemail left? What did the voicemail say? Was there any contact? Can you prove malice? I don't believe that this is anything big. Unless there's a voicemail that I can hear that shows some malice, you've got nothing. This was left in the Discord for me. Thank you, Goldenly, for this. Expert on Civil War says the U.S. is heading towards insurgency, the 21st century version of Civil War. From Aaron Snodgrass. An expert in political violence says extremists could be leading the U.S. towards a modern-day civil war. Barbara Walter, a political science professor at the University of California at San Diego, spoke to the Washington Post earlier this year about the perilous state of American democracy in a far-ranging interview that trended on social media this week. Walter, the author of How Civil Wars Start and How to Stop Them, has spent years studying civil wars, investigating risk factors, the difficulties of resolution, and the approaches to ending the conflicts. Experts long believed that each civil war was caused by its own unique set of factors resistant to parallels or comparisons, but as methodology and technology improved, Walter told the Post that several patterns began to emerge, two of which proved to be highly predictive. The first, she said, was a variable called anocracy. The term is a measure used to describe several factors related to a country's government, including how autocratic or democratic the country is. Anocracy is measured using a scale of -10 to +10, with the former being the most authoritarian and the latter being the most democratic. Well, we're probably at a +10 right about now, or at least an attempt at a +10. Hey, you'll get the vax or you won't go to work. Oh, you don't want it? Well, you have to test every single day, 3 times a day. Well, there was a testing option. You didn't have to get the vax. Yeah, I've got to go test myself 3 freaking times a day. Scholars ultimately found the anocracy variable could accurately predict which countries were prone to civil wars. Neither full democracies nor full autocracies are at a high risk of civil war. Instead, it's the middle zones that are susceptible to instability and violence, Walter said, possibly due to weaker governments that can more easily be challenged. The U.S. posted a +10 rating for several years. Oh, I bet you it was under the Trump years, Walter said, but was briefly downgraded to a 5. Since, it's been boosted to an 8. The second risk factor, according to Walter, is when people in these unstable democracies begin to organize political parties along the lines of racial, religious, or ethnic identities, not completely dissimilar from many members of the Republican Party. Oh! Republicans are the real racists! This woman from UC San Diego just looked for an outright excuse to come out and say all Republicans are racist, and they formed their political party on racism. Congratulations. We're going to civil war because Republicans are racist. I can't with these people. I really can't. Watching what happened to the Republican Party really was the bigger surprise that, wow, we're doubling down on this almost white supremacist strategy. You've been saying Republicans are white supremacists since the Civil Rights Movement. It wasn't true then, and it's not true now. Go ahead and redline another city, put more black people on welfare, and tell them not to come out in your society until it's voting day. Well, even more people. Rage Against the Machine went from fighting the system to telling you that you can get vaccinated and men can give birth. Because we are competing with AM radio people right now, I can't read that meme, but you guys watching on the video can see it. You either die young or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Alright, what else do we have? Oh, let's talk about Newsom. We gotta start wrapping it up a little bit here, too. So we'll talk about this California stuff for sure. I want to get to this video too, but I know we're up on the clock. But let's listen to Governor of California and possible presidential frontrunner for the Democrat Party for 2024, Gavin Newsom.
Well, it's well known that nearly every industry is held to account when their products cause harm or injury. Well, except one, the gun industry. The gun lobby, well, it spent millions and millions of dollars buying off politicians to shield themselves from any liability. Today, California is going to...
Okay, first and foremost, I'll use the example of my Smith again. If I'm out of the range one day, and I happen to be honing my skills, putting some very expensive bullets through my 9mm Smith & Wesson, practicing to blow the lungs out of somebody, as our great houseplant chief has said, practicing for that, and I'm extended, and on the trigger pull, the action flies off my Smith & Wesson and lands right here in my forehead. The gun is disassembled and finds that one of the tabs was cast to an inferior measure. My parents, and my sister, by the way, because my brother-in-law was the one who sold me the gun, will never, ever, ever have to worry about money again for the rest of their lives. You can sue a gun manufacturer if it causes harm due to a manufacturer's defect. The same way you can sue a car manufacturer if the car causes harm due to a manufacturer's defect. What Gavin is talking about, to a lesser extent, is, say, I go out and have a few whiskeys and Chilaga buys them for me, as he has expressed interest in doing, and I get into my pickup truck and bury my pickup truck in a drunken haze in the local Burger King. That Burger King should be able to go back out and sue the Ford Motor Company for my misuse of their product. Or, and we'll go right on the fourth theme, more accurately, what he wants to come back out and do is, say, just in a simulation somewhere, not that this would ever happen in real life, a certain person with some certain racial ideologies would get into a small Ford car, a small Ford SUV, I should say, during a parade of people who he believes are his oppressors, and break down a barrier and drive that small Ford car through a collection of dancing old ladies. Should they then be able to sue the Ford Motor Company for that misuse of the vehicle? That's what Gavin is proposing here, by the way.
To change that. They can no longer hide from the mass destruction that they have caused. I'll be signing a bill that will allow Californians to sue irresponsible gun manufacturers and distributors. If you've been hurt or a family member is a victim of gun violence, you can now go to court and hold the makers of these deadly weapons accountable.
For what? Exactly. There's no manufacturer defect. What is the suit for this? That's the question I want to know. What is the suit for this? Item operated exactly as it was designed and intended to do. Bolt came back. Bolt went forward. Pin hit primer. Hot gases were expelled, and projectile was expelled from armament. What is the suit for this?
Kids, families, and communities deserve to live without the worry of gun violence. And with Assemblymember Ting's bill, gun makers will finally be held to account for their role in this crisis. Well, it's well known that nearly...
Taco Bell says now do vaccines. All right, from NBC4, Governor Newsom signs bill allowing victims of gun violence to sue gun manufacturers. Still no talking to, for what? From Maggie Moore. Californians affected by gun violence will soon be able to sue the firearm manufacturer and sellers for the harm done by these weapons. The change comes after California Governor Gavin Newsom signed Assembly Bill 1594, co-authored by State Assembly members Phil Ting of San Francisco, Mike A. Gibson of Carson, and Chris Ward of San Diego. Gun manufacturers and distributors have been shielded from the mass destruction for too long, Newsom said in a Twitter post that included a video of him holding up the signed bill. The bill, now a new law, allows individuals, local governments, and the California Attorney General to take legal action against gun manufacturers and gun sellers, according to a release about the bill. At the federal level, the 2005 Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act largely shields firearm manufacturers and dealers from lawsuits when people use their products illegally, such as by shooting someone, NBC News reported in April of 2021. Of course it does. Because the manufacturer is not responsible for that. Once that armament leaves Springfield, Massachusetts, or Georgia, or a plethora of other places that they're built around the country, it's no longer the manufacturer's responsibility how it gets used. Again, it's the same thing with the manufacturer of the Escape that went through the Waukesha parade. Oops, I mean, that happened in a simulation. Because we're not supposed to talk about that anymore. Once that Escape left Dearborn, it was no longer the responsibility of the Ford Motor Company. Speaking of California and their gun lobby, Harmeet K. Dillon, our firm, Dillon Law, has already filed a suit on behalf of gun owners challenging California AG's data breach, putting 600,000 CCW owners at risk. Did this happen to you? Sign up on our website. We are preparing more litigation. And we'll read briefly from this. This is an advertisement, but the Dillon Law Group has filed the lawsuit in response to the California AG's disclosure of gun owners' personal information. Sign up to learn more about the lawsuit with Dillon Law Group, as filed in response to the shocking disclosure of the California gun owners' names, addresses, and other information. On June 27, 2022, the AG has announced that his office released the personal information of Californians who were granted or denied concealed carry weapons permits between 2011 and 2021, and that information may have been released for those who have records in the Assault Weapons Registry, Handgun Certified for Sale, Dealer Record of Sale, Firearm Certification System, or Gun Violence Restraining Order databases. The DLG has already set up the AG's office for a letter notifying it to immediately preserve all relevant evidence during the leak. If you are a resident of California who's concerned about your information and may have been disclosed and are interested in learning more about the lawsuit, please complete the form below. Completing this form does not create an attorney-client relationship. So, California is about to get sued. It ain't going to do anything, unfortunately, but they're getting sued. All right, let's get a couple more of these here. Jill Biden is back on the hot seat once again. From the USA Today, First Lady Biden apologizes after comparing Texas Latinos to breakfast tacos. From Scott Gleason and Maria Puente, First Dr. Jill Biden has responded to backlash after saying Texas Latinos are as unique as breakfast tacos in a speech in San Antonio to the nation's largest Hispanic civil rights and advocacy organization. The First Lady apologizes that her words conveyed anything but pure admiration and love for the Latino community. Biden spokesperson Michael LaRosa tweeted on Tuesday, "I've already heard people coming out saying, well, she apologized, get over it." And it's being rightly pointed out that under the rules that Democrats have put out, the apology doesn't mean anything. And if this was Melania saying something like this, then we wouldn't hear the end of it for the rest of the time. Hell, we heard the Christmas video for 4 months. Biden's comments in San Antonio come on Monday were made before President Joe Biden meets with Mexican President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador in the White House amid record migration in the hemisphere and high inflation in both countries. Later on Tuesday, Jill Biden toured the Library of Congress with Mexico's First Lady, Dr. Beatriz Gutierrez Muller de Lopez Obrador. How long does it take you to sign that, by the way? Who took video and photos of what they saw, including a display of mostly Mexican artifacts, books, and art. The two women were impressed, as visitors often are, with the library's beautiful reading room. "This is amazing," Biden said, according to the White House Pool report. So she's apologized. We don't see any video of the apology. We don't see a quote of the apology. We just say, "Oh yeah, no, I'm sorry. Nope. Yeah, no, you're definitely not like tacos." I enjoy tacos. Let's do this one, then we'll close out for the day. Biden lashes out at a reporter asking about Democrats opposed to him running again. "Read the polls, Jack!" President Biden lashed out in response against a poll saying that a large majority of Democrats don't want him to run for re-election in 2024 and would rather have a different presidential nominee. Biden made the comments in response to a question by a reporter Tuesday after the White House congressional picnic. Let's listen.
Mr. President, what's your message to Democrats who don't want you to run again?
They want me to run.
2/3 say they
Read
don't.
the poll. Read the poll, Jack. You guys are all the same. That poll.
Dude, look at the Secret Service agents coming in. No, come on, Mr. President. Let's get out of here.
Showed that 92% of Democrats, if I ran, would vote for me.
A majority of Democrats say they don't want you to run again in 2024.
92% said if I did, they'd vote for me.
So we can talk about that for just a second. Let's look at that one more time. The rage face.
Mr. President, what's your message to Democrats who don't want you to run again?
They want me to run.
2/3 say they
Read
don't.
the poll. Read the poll, Jack. You guys are all the same. That poll showed that 92% of Democrats, if I ran, would vote for me.
A majority of Democrats say they don't want you to run again in 2024.
92% said if I did, they'd vote for me.
92% said that if they did, that if he did run, that they would vote for him. That if he got the nomination, they would vote for him. But 2/3 of them said they would rather have somebody else. And it's like I said, when people talk about and complain about the fact that the admin didn't do enough about the abortion argument, that they haven't done enough about student loans, especially the student loan ones. "Mr. President, you have to go unsign student loans." Why? If he gets the nomination, you're going to vote for him again anyway. Who else are you going to vote for? Are you going to go vote for a local Republican? No, Quest, the number is accurate. 92% say that if he runs, if he's the nominee, they will vote for him. But 2/3 of it want somebody else to go and run again. And what are you going to do? Vote for Trump? Vote for DeSantis? You spent years telling us how they're evil and how they're holding people down and trying to kill them and drown them in the ocean and force COVID into their noses and everything else. So here are some of the real numbers here. Biden was referring to a poll from the New York Times, Siena College, that found 92% of Democrats would vote for him if he ran against former President Trump and if the election were today. Unfortunately for Biden, the same poll had other results that were far less favorable to him. Yes, a poll of largely partisan Democrats who think that every Republican is a fascistic Nazi and it's evil and wants student loan forgiveness and free money for life to go back and be a slam poet and believe that they won't be thrown into the salt mines as soon as they push back against the admin, would vote for him if he was the nominee. Would rather vote for him than generic Republican. Unfortunately for the poll, found that's unfortunately for Biden, the same poll had other results that were far less favorable to him. The poll found 64% of Democrat primary voters said they preferred a candidate other than Biden to run in 2024, while only 26% said he should be the nominee in a re-election campaign. Top of mind, of course, is the age. So, that's what they're saying off of that. And yes, we talked about Root's action yesterday, who said they're going to actively make sure that he's not the nominee. All right, and that is all that we have time for today. So it's time to head out of here. But before we do, one last thing that we always touch on a Wednesday, and that is something that I am thankful for, something that restores my faith in humanity. Now, I don't go much into my personal life on here. I don't do it very often. The people that are involved in my personal life have their own private and personal lives. I have stepped into the arena of political commentary myself. I've stepped into that arena, and I take the barbs, the anger, the threats. I got a threat yesterday, by the way. And then the coward deleted it right away again. So I don't talk very much about my personal life or the people into it. You guys obviously know that I have parents. I didn't just pop into existence somewhere. I've talked about them before, but you know, I leave their names and everything out of it, and I've tried my hardest to keep my surname off of the internet. Even though it's very common, I've tried my hardest to keep my surname off the internet because my sister, my parents, didn't ask to be in this arena. My extended family didn't ask to be in this arena. I asked to be in this arena myself, alone. They all deserve to live quiet lives, and it's the same thing. You guys knew that I've been engaged before. I've been engaged since we've been doing contemporary. She didn't appear on the screen. She didn't do any of this because she didn't ask to be in this arena. She asked to be with me, but not into this arena. Now, I have been seeing somebody a little bit on and off, and there was a situation that happened between her and I that I wasn't sure that I'd made the right decision on. And I called one of my longest term friends, somebody who's been with me, and that's the person that I want to cite and, you know, say a little bit of a thank you to. I know she watches the Instagram Live. I don't know if she watches the YouTube replays or anything. I know she's working right now. But I have a friend from when I lived out in Massachusetts who's been on my side for as long as I've met her, and it's been 14 years at this point that this woman, and we'll go months sometimes without talking. We'll go over a year sometimes without talking. But I know I can just pick up that phone, send the text message. Usually I have to send a text message because I can't come back and call right away because, like me, she's almost always working. But one of the things, and when I was starting to have some of the problems in my personal life, I was able to come back out and know that I could go and talk to her, and she would give me the advice that was true and honest and open. And she's degraded me before when I was doing stupid stuff, rather than what it is that I want to hear. in this particular instance, what I wanted to hear and what was the actual good advice were the same thing. But that's not always been the case as long as I've known this girl. But she's always been there for me. She's probably one of my favorite people. She's coming into a bit of a red pill moment herself, which I'm kind of interested to see how that works living in Massachusetts, in deep, deep blue Massachusetts. But I've been kind of watching the journey that goes off with that as well. She introduced me, and I told the story during the suicide prevention stream of the time where I was almost to the edge. And I had called another friend of mine that lived out east. Now, that's not the same person I'm talking about right now, but this friend of mine that I'm talking about introduced the two of us. I might not be here today if it hadn't been for this particular friend of mine. And neither of the two women that I'm talking about here know this either. The girl who talked me off the edge went out and got married, and I want to call her and thank her and tell her, okay, this is what you did, but her husband doesn't know me from Adam and knows that I did have a crush at one point, so I don't want him to think that I'm trying to move in on his girl, kind of thing. But to have this particular friend who's been there, to have somebody in my corner that's there, again, that I can go months, years without speaking to, and it's still right there. It's just like nothing has ever changed. It's like we're both 23 again. And she's out there trying to reinvent my image because I spent so long in just one long-term relationship after another, and I hadn't really been able to find myself. It's always still the same between her and I. She's always honest with me. She's always truthful. And Kristen, if you're listening to this, I'm very thankful to have you in my life. And I always will be, no matter what. All right. And with that, we're going to head out of here for the day. Let's change up the track. So, we're going to close out the show here with that. Thanks everybody for coming back and sitting by and watching and hanging out with us as we go and talk over the news of the day. We'll be back here tomorrow talking a little bit about some of the things that we left off in the day, including BMW putting a subscription service on their heated seats. The hardware being there, but a software block keeping me from being able to activate them. So we'll talk a bit about that. We'll talk about Ukraine legalizing same-sex marriage, because that's a priority for them right now while they're war-torn. Shinzo Abe getting his final goodbyes, and Wisconsin changing 28 place names that slur Native American women. Plus, whatever happens in the next 24 hours in the administration, on the global stage, in the inflationary report, and of course, finance. Come back here tomorrow morning, 7:30 a.m., and hold me to that, by the way, because I don't want to be sitting here looking and reading through a Posobiec tweet, trying to figure out what's going on with the Supreme Court, and then looking over and finding out 7:31 in the morning. So come back out here, join us here again tomorrow for more Contemporary. We will see you then, and until then, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.